What if Slytherin House refused evacuation at the Battle of Hogwarts and chose to fight beside Harry instead? Let's explore it in this video. Night gnaws at the shattered ceiling of the Great Hall, and Voldemort's voice coils through the cracks in the stone, promising death if Harry does not surrender. The houses are gathered, terrified and torn, the air thick with dust, wand smoke, and the faint metallic smell of blood. The ultimatum hangs there, just like in canon. 1 hour, or Hogwarts burns. Pansy Parkinson's voice slices across the hall, high and sharp, pointing at Harry, calling for them to hand him over and live. Benches scrape, wands half rise, and for one breath, it feels like the whole school might turn on the boy who lived too long. McGonagall seizes that moment and commands all Slytherin students to be removed, marched to the dungeons, locked away as a safety risk and a bargaining chip. The green and silver benches begin to stand, but not to leave. The older Slytherins stay seated, arms folded, eyes cold. They have survived this far by reading power, and the room is looking at them like villains in waiting. Professor Slughorn stumps forward, flustered, trying to usher his house toward the doors, promising safety, promising sense, promising that this is not their fight.
My children, this is not your war. It's their madman's duel.
A girl with pale hair and a measured voice, Daphne Greengrass, stands instead of obeying, and every eye on the Slytherin table swivels to her. She says that if they are to be locked away, it will not be as hostages or scapegoats, and certainly not alone in the dark while others decide the fate of their home.
Then stop calling it your school while locking us in the cellar.
Luna Lovegood, hovering near the doors like a misplaced ghost, tilts her head and softly suggests that if anyone knows how to keep the dungeons safe, it's the people who've lived there for 7 years. She points out, in her gentle sideways way, that Slytherins know every cold corridor, every side passage, every place a frightened first year might try to hide. The Serpent House, for once, is not just the risk. They might be the map. Above them all, unseen but not unfelt, Voldemort presses at the edges of their minds, at the dark marks on older arms, at the carved snakes in the rafters, promising that any Slytherin who remembers their true master will be spared when he comes. Harry feels the room tilt as Slytherin refuses to rise, refuses to leave, and refuses to answer the Dark Lord. Yet,
of course it's Slytherin that has to choose which side Hogwarts is on.
The House of the Serpent declares, in front of everyone, that if they are sent to the dungeons, they will hold the dungeons, not as prisoners, as a front line. No one in that moment knows whether that front line will face Harry or Voldemort. The Great Hall becomes a battlefield of words before curses ever fly. McGonagall stands rigid at the staff table, her jaw clenched so hard it might crack, insisting that Slytherin be removed for the safety of everyone else. She sees faces that once laughed while Muggle-borns were tormented, faces that bore dark marks, faces that ran with the Carrows. Trust for her is not a spell she can cast in an instant. Slughorn flaps his arms, robes billowing, pleading with his house to come quietly, to think of their families, to avoid heroics.
This is not negotiation. This is a siege.
I assure you discretion has saved more lives than bravery ever will.
Daphne answers that discretion didn't stop Voldemort from coming back, or the Carrows from torturing their own classmates in these same corridors. She says that if Slytherin is forever the house blamed when things go wrong, then they should at least be allowed to choose how they're blamed. Harry, Ron, and Hermione linger near the doors, hearing every word, understanding that this argument is about more than one night. It's about who Hogwarts belongs to when the killing stops. Luna steps into the circle, dreamy eyes unfazed by the tension, and suggests that Slytherins could shelter the youngest children in the dungeons and block any Death Eaters who try to sneak in from below. She says it like she's talking about Nargles in the mist, but the logic lands No one else knows those passages as well.
You can't ask a serpent to grow feathers, only to choose where it coils.
Reluctantly, McGonagall agrees to a compromise. The younger Slytherins will be escorted to secure rooms under guard, but the 6th and 7th years may remain in the dungeons as defenders under Slughorn's command, answering to her strategy. It is not full trust. It is not full exile either. In the corridor outside, the argument becomes a whispered war council. Harry watches as lines are drawn on a floating map of Hogwarts, green bands marking Slytherin defensive zone, alongside red and blue and yellow. Hermione points out, low and urgent, that if Slytherin defects mid-fight, the entire underbelly of the castle becomes Voldemort's knife at their throats.
You know what this means, don't you? We either trust Slytherin or we fight them too.
Harry doesn't answer, but his silence is an answer of its own. Down in the dungeons, Slytherin's common room glows an eerie green as torches flare to life and the lake presses blackly against the windows. Maps are unfurled on tables, secret passages marked in quick, efficient strokes. Slughorn reveals half-remembered founder wards built into the walls, coiled sigils that can be awakened to stun or repel intruders. He holds back the darkest of them, the ones that whisper of pain and permanent harm. The gatekeeper still keeps one hand on the lock. Draco Malfoy stands apart from the bustle, staring at the faint throb of his dark mark and the faces of first years curled asleep in corners. Through the mark, he feels the tug of his parents' fear, his mother's terror, his father's shame. A phantom vision flickers in his mind. His parents on their knees, wands aimed at their backs, Voldemort promising them life if Draco opens the way below.
You want us in the dungeons? Fine. Then the dungeons answer to us.
Luna appears again where she should not be, stepping through a half-forgotten stairway that links Ravenclaw Tower to the lower floors. She explains calmly that this passage doesn't exist on any map but hers, and suggests using it to shuttle fighters and messages between the dungeons and the Room of Requirement without alerting the main stairs. She treats house lines like nothing more than colored threads to be tied together. When the first snatchers slip through a crack in the wards, they don't find cowering children. They find a corridor lined with sleeping serpents in stone. At Slughorn's whispered order, the runes ignite, stone snakes springing to life and coiling around masked ankles, while 6th and 7th years silently stun, bind, and disarm. The fight is brutal, close, and unseen by anyone above. When it's done, the bodies are levitated to a storage closet, wands stripped, memories ready to be wiped if needed. The younger students never know how close the danger came. Back in the common room, an argument sparks in the lingering smell of singed dust. Blaise Zabini coolly suggests that keeping the children alive makes them useful hostages if the tide turns. Daphne snaps that they shielded the children because someone had to, not because they calculated leverage.
Neutrality dies the moment the first curse flies.
Our power isn't that we survive. It's who we decide survives with us.
The ethos of the house is being rewritten mid-siege. Above, the map in the Great Hall shifts as the staff receive word of the repulsed incursion. Slughorn's dungeons are no longer simply a risk. They are a shield. The first scoreboard of the night settles into place. Scoreboard, allies, 2, Gryffindor-led resistance, and the Slytherin dungeons packed. Strongholds held, 1, the Great Hall, Horcruxes destroyed, 4, the diary, the ring, the locket, the cup. The next moves will decide whether that green band on the map saves them or dooms them. Slytherin and Ravenclaw prefects carve updated runes into the dungeon walls under Flitwick's supervision, adjusting ancient serpentine sigils so that they stun intruders instead of torture them. Sparks dance along cool stone, green and blue magic lacing together in swift, precise strokes. Hufflepuff students haul blankets and food into unused storerooms, while Slytherins line the doors with defensive charms, turning the cold underbelly into a makeshift shelter for the youngest and the wounded. The air smells of damp stone and warm bread, fear and stubborn hope. Slughorn unlocks hidden cabinets of rare potions, strengthening draughts, anti-hex salves, and smoky vials he refuses to name aloud. He hands them out with shaking hands, pressing tiny glass bottles into palms he once graded on essays. Draco, Theo Knott, and a reluctant Goyle guide order members through unseen tunnels, ambushing wandering snatchers and sealing off routes Voldemort's forces used in the first wave. Their footsteps echo on stone that has heard centuries of secrets. Luna and Ginny charm paper cranes to flit from tower to dungeon, wings scribbled with coded updates and pleas for backup. The crane's ink bleeds red and green and blue and yellow, the houses literally folding into each other. The Bloody Baron glides through the lower corridors, his chains clinking softly as he reports ghost sightings of Death Eater movement. For the first time, Slytherins look at their terrifying house ghost and feel something like gratitude. The defense map on the Great Hall floor redraws again, a new green band labeled Slytherin Defensive Zone beside the others. Hogwarts for one night looks less like 4 houses at war and more like one castle with many hearts. The alarm does not come from a scream. It comes from the Bloody Baron, who appears in the Slytherin common room dripping spectral blood and muttering of masked figures slipping through weak wards near the kitchens. Slughorn stiffens, then moves faster than his bulk suggests possible, barking orders as older Slytherins and a handful of DA members assemble. They are going to war in close quarters. The gauntlet is a water-slick corridor where pipes drip from the ceiling and the stones are already damp with centuries of seepage. Giants have widened some of the drainage tunnels. Death Eaters slink through the gaps, wands ready, confident no children could stop them. They are wrong. At Slughorn's signal, Slytherin stone serpents awaken. The walls pulse with green light as carved heads uncoil from the masonry, mouths opening, forcing the intruders into narrow kill zones. Stunners and shield charms explode in the cramped dark, curses ricocheting off wet stone, sparks hissing as they hit the puddles underfoot. For a moment, the gauntlet works perfectly. Then the ceiling starts to come down. Giants slam their fists up into the arches, cracking the rune patterns, dust and chunks of rock raining down on friend and foe alike. The carefully calibrated wards begin to misfire, leaving gaps where there should be shields. A group of younger students, hustled toward safety too late, find themselves cut off in a pocket of crumbling stone as Death Eaters advance. Slughorn shouts for retreat, for regrouping, for patience. Vincent Crabbe looks at the falling ceiling, the terrified children, and the shattered serpent sigils that no longer obey. He remembers a lesson Slughorn gave years ago, half drunk and half boastful, about a cursed fire so powerful it could eat anything it touched. Fiend fire. The vials locked deep in Slughorn's cupboard.
That fire was locked away for a reason, boy.
Then you shouldn't have taught us its name.
Crabbe breaks the lock, grabs the vial, and hurls it down the corridor with a word he was never meant to say. Fiendfire erupts in the cramped space like a living dragon of flame, coiling and snapping, devouring giants and Death Eaters and the very walls themselves. The gauntlet turns into a furnace, stone serpents screaming silently as they melt. Chaos explodes. Slytherins and DA members scramble to yank children back, conjuring shields of water and rock, casting every cooling charm they know. Draco lunges through smoke to drag a petrified first year out from beneath a falling arch. Luna, inexplicably in the right place again, conjures shimmering barriers that steer the fiendfire away from retreating students and toward the intruders. Neville wraps conjured vines around a giant's ankles, yanking it into the heart of the fire. Crabbe, the architect of this catastrophe, tries to outrun his own flames. They curl back with cruel intelligence, licking up his legs, devouring him from the inside out. His screams echo through the dungeons until the fire eats even the sound. Slughorn, faced with the monster he once described in a classroom, gathers his full strength and unleashes an extinguishing charm so massive it leaves him sagging against the wall. The fiend fire gutters, shrieks, and finally collapses into a heap of smoking ash and fused stone. What remains of the gauntlet is a charred, half-collapsed ruin. The Death Eaters are dead or bound. The giants lie in blackened heaps. The children are alive. But one of their own lies in the ash, and the serpentine wardwork is broken beyond easy repair.
We're not dying as his pawns or yours. We're dying as Slytherins who chose.
Some magic only listens to people who are already burning inside.
The new rule of this alternate timeline is proven. Slytherin's cunning, turned outward as a shield instead of inward as a knife, is terrifyingly effective, but volatile. They can save Hogwarts. They can also burn it down by accident. In the smouldering quiet after the gauntlet, the Slytherin common room feels more like a war room than a sanctuary. The walls are streaked with soot, students bandaged and exhausted, Slughorn pale with guilt and strain. It is then that the snakes in the carved fireplace move. Their stone heads swivel, eyes glowing a sickly green as Voldemort's voice pours out of them in Parseltongue, hissing through every crack. He speaks to them as his true house, calling them his heirs, his chosen, and asking why they bleed for a school that never trusted them. He promises that any Slytherin who opens the way below, who deactivates the wards and allows his army into the dungeons, will be spared. Their families will be protected. Their bloodlines will be restored to honor when the new order rises.
My house, my heirs, why bleed for a mudblood school?
The voice curls around Draco's spine and digs into the raw wound of his parents' fear. He sees again the vision of his mother and father on their knees in the forest, wands aimed at them, Voldemort promising their lives in exchange for his obedience. Pansy Parkinson seizes on the offer like a lifeline. She argues that Slytherin has always survived by aligning with power, not by dying for Gryffindor dramatics. They should accept. Open the wards. Deliver Harry. Live.
We're Slytherins. We survive. That's the oath.
Daphne steps forward, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. She points at Crabbe's ashes and the bruises on first year's faces, and reminds them that they didn't survive tonight by kneeling. They survived by choosing who to shield. If they hand over Harry now, every child they just saved becomes a bargaining chip they sold.
Survival isn't a virtue if you have to flay your soul for it. Cunning without a line is just cowardice that learned Latin.
Slughorn, shoulders sagging, finally tells them the truth he has carried for decades. He explains how he once admired a brilliant boy named Tom Riddle, how he told him about Horcruxes, how he spent years hiding from the consequences of that conversation. Every favor he curried, every safe position he took, was built on guilt. And Voldemort still came.
I taught the monster his trick. I thought I could hide from the bill. You can't. Proximity to him doesn't save you. It just lets you watch the ruin up close.
Luna, sitting cross-legged on a green sofa, as if she belongs there, quietly observes that any power demanding they betray children to live is already planning their deaths later. She paints, in simple words, a future where Slytherin is remembered as the house that outwitted Voldemort instead of bowing to him.
If someone says, betray them and I'll keep you safe, they're just telling you the order they plan to kill you in.
The common room falls into a tense, electric silence. Then older Slytherins raise their wands, not to cast, to vote. Wand tips lit means alliance with Hogwarts, with all its flaws and suspicions. Dark means alliance with Voldemort and the promise of survival at any cost. Some wands do not light. Those students will slip away later, choosing neither side fully. But the majority glow green and silver and white, raised toward the lake-dark ceiling. They choose to slam their door shut against the Dark Lord's army, not open them. Voldemort's voice in the snakes curdles with cold fury and fades. The House of Slytherin has just told him no. Betrayal, when it comes, arrives through a side passage and a pocket of cowardice. A handful of Slytherins who kept their wands dark during the vote slip into an old servant's corridor, family tokens in hand, signaling Death Eaters to the thinnest part of the wards near the Hufflepuff cellar. The breach is sudden and vicious. Masked figures and Greyback's pack pour into a corridor lined with barrels and food crates, where Hufflepuff students are trying to shepherd terrified evacuees. Children scream as curses explode, walls splinter, and the smell of blood mingles with flour and spilled milk. For a few dreadful minutes, it looks like the entire shelter will be overrun. News races upward faster than owls. Death Eaters in the cellars, Hufflepuffs under attack, entry from the dungeons. The houses above do what they've always done. They blame Slytherin. Gryffindor fighters rush toward the lower stairs, fury on their faces, ready to cut off access to the dungeons entirely to hex anyone in green they see. The fragile alliance frays in an instant. Neville Longbottom, hearing Hufflepuff screams and Slytherin's name cursed in the same breath, makes a choice. He grabs his wand, his courage, and a handful of DA members, Luna, Seamus, Ernie, and charges towards the breach. At the same moment, Draco, Daphne, Blaise, and a cluster of Slytherin fighters receive the same news from the Baron. They run too. They meet in the middle of a collapsing corridor filled with dust, howls, and flying curses. For a heartbeat, they almost turn their wands on each other.
If you're here to betray us, Malfoy, you picked a terrible time to save my neck.
Don't make me regret it, Longbottom.
Then Greyback lunges out of the smoke toward a line of first years, teeth bared. Neville and Draco curse him at the same time, spells slamming the werewolf into the far wall. The fight that follows is brutal and improvised. Neville conjures thorned vines from the floor, tripping Death Eaters and pinning them to the barrel staves. Daphne and Blaise redirect curses off stone pillars, turning the cramped space into a ricochet maze. Luna casts disarming charms, so swiftly that wand after wand flies into her arms like startled birds. In the chaos, Draco sees a group of children trapped at the far end of the corridor, cut off by a swarm of Death Eaters and the trembling remains of an old staircase, one of Slytherin's safest escape routes for generations. He can either hold that route for his house's future, or destroy it to save the children now. He raises his wand and shatters it. Stone roars as the staircase collapses in a controlled avalanche, crushing the attacker's path and opening a gap for the children to be pulled through. A secret Slytherin advantage dies in that moment, so that a handful of terrified 11-year-olds can live. Above, McGonagall receives the report. Hufflepuff children, rescued by a mixed squad of DA and Slytherin fighters, breach sealed, traitors identified. Her expression tightens, then softens by a hair.
Slytherin defended the cellars.
Later, a small Hufflepuff first year is heard whispering to anyone who will listen that the snakes came, but they were on our side.
The snakes came, and they stood in front of us.
Trust is not healed, but in blood and dust and broken stone, it has begun to grow. The war room in the Great Hall feels different now. The map on the floor shows more than lines. It shows choices. Green, red, blue, and yellow bands coil and intertwine as the staff, the DA, and Slytherin delegates crowd around. Slughorn stands beside McGonagall instead of slightly behind her, his usually jolly face set in tired determination. They are out of time. Nagini is still alive. Voldemort is still immortal. Harry knows what canon has already dictated, that he must walk into the forest and let himself be killed to break the last piece of soul inside him. But in this timeline, the castle itself will not be passive when that happens. Hermione lays out the logic, voice steady despite the chaos outside. Nagini is a Horcrux and must die, but she is bound tightly to Voldemort. If they try to kill her in open battle, he will protect her. If they can lure her into the one part of Hogwarts saturated with Parseltongue-rich, serpent-themed wards, they might use that connection against him. The dungeons, Slytherin's domain. Slytherin students propose using the serpentine rune network they've been reinforcing to create a host field, a magically sensitive environment that responds strongly to Nagini's presence. The idea is simple and terrifying. Turn Hogwarts into one great serpent that coils around Voldemort's serpent. Use his own affinity as the trap. Roles are assigned with ruthless clarity. Gryffindor and DA fighters will lead skirmishes in the upper castle, drawing Death Eater fire and keeping pressure off the dungeons. Hufflepuff and the remaining staff will fortify the shelters and keep the wounded alive. Ravenclaw will manage vantage points, information flow, and long-range spell work from the towers. Slytherin will control the undercastle, shepherding Nagini along pre-chosen paths of runes toward a place where Neville, or whoever, stands there, can strike. Harry quietly accepts that he must still go into the forest, still stand before Voldemort, still die. The difference is that when he falls, he will not be leaving Slytherin in a locked cellar. He will be leaving them in motion. He will be leaving them coiled. He will be leaving them ready to bite the hand that claimed them. Down in the dungeons, Slytherin students gather around their crest, wands extended, swearing that their wards will not open for Voldemort. They will open only for Nagini. Scoreboard updates in the narrator's mind. Scoreboard. Allies. 4. Gryffindor-led resistance. The Slytherin Dungeons Pact. Hufflepuff shelters. Ravenclaw vantage. Strongholds held. 3. The Great Hall. The dungeons. The Hufflepuff cellars. Horcruxes destroyed. 5. The diary. The ring. The locket. The cup. The diadem. 1 soul shard in a snake. 1 life in a boy. 1 castle as host. Dawn never truly breaks over Hogwarts. The sky is a bruised grey when Voldemort returns, carrying Harry's limp body into the ruined courtyard. The scene plays out almost as canon remembers. The march of Death Eaters, the stunned horror, Hagrid's sobs, Voldemort's gloating. He throws Harry down, calls for surrender, promises mercy. And then something different happens. The stones beneath his feet light up. The Serpent Ward field awakens. Green-silver sigils blaze across the courtyard floor, racing up pillars and along walls, joining in a web that pulses like a heartbeat. Death Eaters stagger as the ground shifts, their balance stolen by rings of stone that subtly tilt and slide, moving like coils tightening around prey. Giants roar as the surfaces under their feet suddenly slope, sending them crashing into conjured pits and spikes. Curses cast at the defenders veer off at strange angles, swallowed by rune clusters and spat back in arcs of redirected light. For the first momentum swing, Hogwarts is not just a battlefield. It is a living serpent coiling around the invaders. Slytherin's magic, threaded through ancient wards, turns the floor itself into their ally. In the dungeons, the runes flare in echo as Nagini stirs. Drawn by the surge of serpent magic, she slides through the undercroft, following paths that glow faintly to her senses. Slytherin fighters guide her movement by selectively strengthening and weakening runes, shepherding her toward the one place they have prepared for her end. For a few glorious minutes, it looks like the plan will work flawlessly. Then the warlord understands what is being done. Voldemort feels the serpent resonance in the wards, senses the unnatural compliance of the stone, and realizes that someone is using his house, his symbol, against him. He drives his will outward through Nagini, into the rune network, hijacking parts of the serpent ward field. Some of the glowing lines blacken, then twist, turning hostile to both sides, hurling random bursts of chaotic magic. Stone rings buck beneath, defenders' feet as well as attackers. In the dungeons, corridors tremble and crack as Nagini tears through ward clusters with violent force, her magical bulk shredding carefully tuned sigils in her path. Students down there find themselves under direct attack as the Horcrux serpent lashes out. The momentum swings the other way. The castle becomes a madhouse of shifting, semi-sentient stone and misfiring magic, dangerous to everyone. In one corridor, Daphne and Blaise are forced to hold a collapsing arch with overlapping shield charms, while younger students crawl under their arms to safety. In another, Luna and Theonot disperse chaotic spell bursts with hastily erected reflective surfaces, turning wild curses into harmless showers of sparks. Above, in the courtyard, Voldemort laughs as the ground betrays the defenders as often as the attackers.
Did you think you could turn my house against me?
Slughorn, standing amid the defenders in the courtyard now, eyes hollow but resolved, answers with his wand lifted.
Not your house. Not anymore.
The second swing is uglier than any duel. The Serpent Ward field, half claimed by Voldemort's will, half held by Slytherin, jerks and spasms, tearing up chunks of ground, making every step a risk. Still, the defenders cling to their plan. They know the true hinge is not the carpeting of wards. It is Nagini. In the Undercroft, Slytherin fighters move in a desperate dance around the serpent's path, opening and closing gates, collapsing safe tunnels, forcing her toward a particular staircase that leads not to an empty room, but to Neville. Neville waits in a chamber where runes from all four houses converge. Slytherin serpents, Gryffindor lions, Ravenclaw eagles, Hufflepuff knots. The air is thick with magic, like static before a storm. He is shaking, but he is ready. Above, Harry stirs. He rises, alive, the protection of his self-sacrifice ringing through the ranks of defenders like a silent bell. The killing curse no longer behaves as Voldemort expects. The wands connect, golden fire erupting between them, priori incantatem blazing in front of a courtyard of stunned witnesses. Beneath their feet, the Serpent Ward field flickers between obedience and rebellion, its lines pulsing in time with the locked beam. Harry holds the line, not alone, but with a castle full of choices behind him.
You never understood them. You only scared them.
Neville hears the echo of Harry's stand in the trembling stone above him. Nagini bursts into the convergence chamber, scales glittering with borrowed power, eyes burning with the rage of her master. The runes flare white-hot, Slytherin serpents in the stone coil, not around her, but around the surrounding space, forming an invisible cage that holds her just long enough. Slytherin students on the flanks channel their magic into the ward lines, feeding the restraint, holding the Horcrux in place. Gryffindor courage in Neville's spine, Hufflepuff loyalty in the hands that dragged him here, Ravenclaw planning in the angles of the runes, Slytherin cunning in the path that led her here. Every house is present in this moment.
Time for the snake to answer to the lion, the badger, the eagle, and itself.
He swings the sword of Gryffindor in a clean, brutal arc. Nagini dies. The last Horcrux shatters. In that instant, the Serpent Ward field stops listening to Voldemort at all. The green-silver lines in the stone flare one last time, then settle into a coherent pattern, answering only to the united will of Hogwarts. Death Eater curses misfire, flickering out against suddenly solid shields. Giants find the ground under them, turning to sucking mud, dragging them down. Snatchers are funneled into dead ends, where DA fighters and Slytherin hexers wait. In the courtyard, the wand lock between Harry and Voldemort surges as the Dark Lord's immortality crumbles. His killing curse rebounds for the final time. The skull mark above the castle, once an emblem of his victory, bursts like a rotten bubble. Harry stands. Voldemort falls. Slytherin's banner, still green but now stained and torn, flaps over a courtyard where serpents in stone have fought for Hogwarts, not against it.
Remind me again why we didn't evacuate?
Because history doesn't remember the ones who hid in cupboards.
See, the castle always had a serpent heart. It just needed to learn who to coil around.
The Battle of Hogwarts ends not with Slytherin locked away, but with Slytherin written into the foundations of the victory. Silence after war is never truly silent. It is filled with the rustle of bandages, the murmur of healing spells, the quiet weeping of those who count their dead. The Great Hall is once again a place of gathering, cots and stretchers lined between the house tables. Slytherin students sit among the others, green ties beside red, blue, and yellow, their faces as exhausted and haunted as anyone's. You cannot tell at a glance who fought on which side. That is the point. Later, formal hearings are held, not in the ministry at first, but in a repaired wing of Hogwarts. The school that was almost their grave becomes the court that judges what they did. Draco Malfoy stands before Kingsley Shacklebolt and Professor McGonagall. His list of sins is long: serving as a Death Eater, failing to kill Dumbledore, bringing Death Eaters into the school in 6th year. But his list of deeds from this night is not short: collapsing the secret staircase to save Hufflepuff children, fighting at the breach, helping guide Order members through the dungeons.
We cannot rebuild this world by pretending every serpent was a basilisk.
Conditional clemency is granted. No Azkaban. Instead, years of supervised service, rebuilding Hogwarts, dismantling dark infrastructure, turning his knowledge of hidden passageways and dark families into tools for healing instead of harm. McGonagall's gaze is hard, but there is a flicker of something like respect. Then Pansy Parkinson is brought forward. She did call for Harry to be handed over. She did argue for siding with Voldemort at the midpoint, but evidence is presented that after the vote, she quietly informed Daphne and Slughorn of the exact route the turncoat Slytherins were likely to use to betray them. That information helped them anticipate the breach and mount the rescue. Her motives are murkier than anyone would like. Her actions saved lives. Her words nearly cost them. Her sentence is a narrow path. Her wand remains licensed but under strict monitoring. She is barred from certain public offices, and her name becomes a cautionary tale about late repentance. Mercy here is a scalpel, not a blanket. Back in the Great Hall, banners are rehung. Kingsley serves as acting Minister for Magic. McGonagall accepts the mantle of Headmistress. Slughorn stays on as head of Slytherin, but under a new charter that commits the house to cunning in defense of the whole school, a phrase that will be carved under the crest. A cross-house council of prefects emeritus is created: Neville, Luna, Daphne, Ernie, and others, tasked with advising on reforms, more joint classes, shared common areas, defense training that mixes houses by design. The map of Hogwarts' political future looks different now. Slytherin is no longer the quiet villain in the corner. It is a house on probation, yes, but also a house that bled for the castle in its own way. Yet embers of the old story remain. Some Slytherins leave Britain entirely, heading for the continent with trunks full of heirlooms and resentment. In a shadowed corridor, an unnamed student fingers an old family signet, eyes on the newly carved words beneath the Slytherin crest. They whisper that serpents can always shed their skin again, and that not everyone likes the color of the new one. The legend of Slytherin has shifted tonight. Its capacity for dangerous power remains.
You wanted a chance to show what Slytherin can be, Horace. Now you have the rest of your life to prove it.
Let them say we were cunning. Just make sure they say we were theirs too.
That's our theory of what happens when Slytherin refuses to hide, claims the dungeons as a battlefield, and helps Hogwarts choke the Dark Lord with his own serpent. If you enjoyed this canon-twisted, lore-accurate alternate timeline, tap like, share this with another Potterhead who argues about houses, and subscribe so you don't miss the next What If. Tell me in the comments, if another house refused to evacuate or obey orders at the Battle of Hogwarts, which one would change the war the most, and what single choice should we rewrite next?